Okay, block pressing day 3. So, actually it might be day 4 of block pressing. We've used about a third of the sand that we have, or maybe between a third and a half. This is a big pile of dry clay that was brought in over the past couple days. So that's going to start getting crushed tomorrow because we're almost out of clay here. Renan estimates we have another 6 wheelbarrows. I'd say he's about right. So we have enough for a couple more rounds of 5% cement blocks. We switched to 5% cement today, about halfway through the day. I got up to a good stopping point on the 10%. So these wrapped pallets are 10%. So as you can see, we have, what do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have about 1,000 block. It's less. These are 6 layers high. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, there's a couple. So we have about 900 or so 10% cement blocks, and then we switched to 5% just as an experiment. And the 5% cement blocks come out pretty nice. I would say that on average they're coming out a lot better than the 10% blocks. They don't have any of this cracking that was characteristic. Well, there's a tiny one right there. That looks like a surface crack. But if this was a 10% cement block, that would be a larger defined crack right there. And that may be because of something called lamination, which would indicate too high of a clay content. So that's something to look into. I mean, maybe we don't have to spend so much time crushing clay. So we will try a lower percentage clay in a future block. So let's see, Power Cube today did fine. It ran out of gas. I oiled it up. I fixed one more leak right at the top of the radiator, on the intake to the radiator. That was leaking pretty bad, so we filled that up. First we disconnected from the CEB press. We filled up the Power Cube and then connected the Power Cube outlet with a hose just right back to its input, or tank return, so that we could cycle the oil. And I just ran it on low throttle for 10 minutes. And you know, if it's a 13 GPM or whatever, 15 GPM, but low throttle, so let's say like 10 GPM, 10 minutes is gonna move, 100 gallons of oil. So that's more than enough. The press started malfunctioning a little bit. Nothing to do with the valves. Valves ran great. In fact, they're running ideal. I had to change the sensors. Let me uncover this here. Okay, so because the drawer solenoid valve is the difference, the Northman. It's still the motor spool, but it's the Northman, and it's got better behavior than the Power Valve USA. It stops a lot faster, so I had to change my sensor locations. Believe it or not, that's my set point right there. Yeah, I can, but I just gotta move that to the bolt to a different hole, and that'll be fine. We no longer will need to have it at that angle like that. But yeah, I had to mess with my sensors. And other than that, it's pretty good. Oh, at lunchtime, I did something where I noticed I was getting a lot of soil buildup underneath the drawer. So that would be under there. I was getting compressed soil under there. So I took out the bottom plate. I took out that soil catch plate right here, this 1/8 inch plate, these 2 bolts, and the 2 on the other side. And we took out the table, and we cleared out, well, I did this by myself. I cleared out oh, by the way, see this rubbing here? I think that's because of that problem where soil builds up in there, gets stuck on one side more than the other, and it kind of pushes the. I mean, these. Okay, I understand the design consideration where you don't want to have anything holding these rods out here because you don't want anything connected to the secondary arm, these arms, the primary arms, because those move independently of the press chamber. But at the same time, it's totally ridiculous the way this is built, because these rods are not constrained, and they just flex all over the place. So the drawer goes wherever the hell it wants to go. So it can be a little bit frustrating at times. And then I personally have gotten the hang of adjusting the drawer bushings, which are totally worn out anyway. They're totally cammed out, but I've gotten the hang of adjusting these nuts so that I can kind of set it where I want. But okay, nothing about this machine is square. Like nothing about it is square. I think that when they welded up the main chamber, they didn't even weld it square. It just so it is what it is. And in spite of that, we're making good blocks. Just to come back again and admire these beauties. The 5% they just feel a lot better than the 10%. And I think that really comes down to moisture distribution. It's really hard to hydrate the cement evenly. Even though I'm starting out with really nicely wet sand, so that moisture is already distributed throughout the whole mix, even so, with a higher cement content, it just doesn't hydrate, and you actually get less compaction because, and the way I know that is that, okay, even if the mix is fully hydrated to the point where it's too wet, you still don't get very good blocks with the higher cement content. But when you're at, let's say you're at like OMC, for example, you're at a nice dry wetness, you'll know what I mean. You don't get the same level of compaction because my blocks come out larger for the same press timing. So I have to go in and change it, and it's kind of sucks. I believe that we should put in a potentiometer. I'm gonna have Scott bring one down because it's it's not ideal the way it is now. So let's see what else. So power cube leak fixed, and when we filled it back up, we ran all the fluid through the filter before we reconnected to the machine. Messed with the drawer guides to try to bring the drawer closer down so we don't get as much buildup, so that we don't get forced over to the side. And then I still started getting an issue where just want to say this real quick. We did have one bridging event where we started with our new mix, which was less cement, therefore it was less dry. It bridged the first time we did it, so we filled up the hopper and it bridged, and we were going at it with a digging bar, and what happens is it just all compresses in here, and I think something's going wrong with the program where. So I'm running this press on sensors or timing, and sometimes the timer just freaks out and stops the drawer almost right after, or it's a high pressure thing, and there's like a little high pressure artifact. So what I'm gonna have to do is add in the code a timer so that we don't look for high pressure, because I have it so that when we're moving to midpoint, we look for midpoint sensor, midpoint timing, or if something went totally wrong, then at least at high pressure we'll stop. So it's looking for high pressure too. So if that buildup on the far side of the drawer there underneath caused high pressure artifacts, then, well, yeah, the drawer is going to stop, because what's been happening is we'll be all the way forward in the load position, and then it goes to midpoint and just kind of goes back a little bit, and this happens like once every 10 or 15 blocks. I'll notice that I've just got a pile of soil coming out of the machine instead of a block. So I have to add a timer. I tried deleting the, I don't know. There's one pressure is high thing that I deleted. Oh, the when you're going midpoint to eject position for the drawer, I deleted the high pressure check there, so that we're actually only looking for the sensor right now. And that I did because I had a different issue where, because of that soil buildup down there, I was getting high pressure on the retract to go to the eject block position. So I had to delete that high pressure check there. So we only look for the sensor right now. Other than that, let's see. Today we had Renan, we had Alvaro. My normal crew is Alvaro, Ryan, Martine, Ardani, and Renan. So that's 5. And then I had 2 guys here straining sand, because I need sand fast, and I need all those guys. So I've got 1 or 2 people laying block. Typically I only have 1 guy laying block because it doesn't matter, because I just stack them all up on that table right there, and like it'll pile up. You get like 20 blocks on the table, but then we'll have a stoppage and the 1 guy can go, and it doesn't matter if it's just 1 guy laying block. So then I'll have like 4 or 5 guys mixing. Oh, and what's his face? Audrey did a half day, because I always offer him to do a half day because he really kicks up the team and gets people working hard. At least I think so. So yeah, we had 2 to 3 guys filtering sand, and then in the morning I had them doing clay. So we had a lot of people here. Basically, we had like 9 people here, and it's too many people for this to be. These blocks are too expensive right now. I mean, clearly, but you really can't do this without machinery. And even if we had a tractor with a rototiller, okay, it's always, well, why aren't you doing it with a tractor with a rototiller? Well, look at the situation here. We have, well, let me start back here. We have wet material. Okay? Even up to this here, we have all this material is wet. Okay, all our piles are like that. The only dry material we get is during the day. We spread it out on pallets, on a screen on pallets, so you get wind flow underneath and it can dry. And we do that. We just scrape the top layer and we dry it. Now, if you have a tractor out here, you're spending $100 a day to do that, and you've already spent $100 US. So you spent $200 US just to have a tractor that's got to sit and wait till you have dry material. So then, once that material is dry, then yeah, maybe a rototiller could come in and pulverize it. But I guarantee you, you're not going to end up with a product that looks like this right here. I mean, personally, I still think that I have slightly too large of a particle size on this crushed material. You get a lot of dust, as you can see, but what you would get with a rototiller is maybe something like this, right? But the issue is, this is such a high clay material, you really need something like this, fine crush. You can't use this in that state. It's too much of a clay content. You have to really modify the grain size distribution. And in order to do that, you need to crush it down to something real small. A rototiller simply cannot do that. So I'm kind of sick of hearing that one. The other thing is, you've already spent 100 US a day to get half the work done, basically, because well, not half the work. Let me rephrase that. You spent 100 US to rent your tractor. And by the way, that's just the tractor. That doesn't include diesel, which is expensive here. Let's say you burn 3 gallons of diesel in a day. Well, that's another 30 Belizean dollars, which is one worker. And then 200 US is 6. So you're at 7 workers that you've already paid for just to have the tractor out here. And that doesn't include the cost of the rototiller. So let's say the rototiller is another 50 US a day to rent that. So I just don't see how a rototiller on a tractor is going to do anything like what we need to make these blocks down here under these conditions. Now, if I had found the perfect material, then yeah, maybe a rototiller would work. But since we actually have to modify the grain size distribution of our material, I'm sorry, but it's just not going to work. There's no part of that works. Now, if you have the proper machinery, like let's say you have a motor-driven pulverizer. So like, let's say you have a hammer mill, or you have, let's say like this pendulum crusher. What if you had kind of like 2 wheels turning opposite rotations and crushing down the center, and you had that on a motor, and you were running it on electric, because electric is cheaper down here than diesel or gas. So if you're running something like that, then yes, it does pay to be running. I'm not saying machines don't do the work. It's not more economical. I'm just saying, like, a tractor on a rototiller is just absolutely not the right machine for these conditions. So if you had 2 machines, you would need a crusher and a mixer, and probably a conveyor belt. And you're still, I mean, then let's say your investment is $4,000 US, probably at the minimum. I would say $2,000 minimum to make those. I mean, the open source one is like $3,000. But if you're having to pay people to fabricate it, that soil mixer, for the record, it was $2,000 in materials. Everyone keeps saying, oh, well, once it went over $2,000 in materials, well, it was $2,000 in materials. It was just another $1,000 in labor. So I don't know what everyone's smoking when they keep saying that it went over $2,000 in materials, because it didn't. Okay. Other than that, today was a pretty good day. We can do better, but we're almost out of clay. So tomorrow we're probably only going to get another 200 blocks. So we'll just kind of fill up these pallets, and then that'll be it. So we're going to have to get crushing. But we have about half the block that we need for the workshop. So that's good. Yeah, I haven't started doing the small block yet, but we'll start doing that soon. All right, adios from Tarptown.